All right. Hello, everyone. This is Mike Smith at the brokerage, and today my guest is Kyle Estep from Oscar Health. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for inviting me to join you on the show.
You're welcome. I appreciate the chance to talk to you today, learn a little bit more about you and also Oscar Health. All right. So a little bit of history here for our podcast listeners. I met you in 2015. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And that time I was like, gosh, man, I don't need another carrier. I need another company like I need another hole in my head. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, well, I was joining this young little startup called Oscar Health, and we were in New York, and I was joining, and my mission was to come to Texas to grow the business in Texas. And everyone I talked to said, if you're going to sell health insurance in Texas, you got to work with Mike Smith, you got to work with the brokerage. And we came in here like a bat out of heck.
Yeah.
And we said, we got to come work with Mike. And I think you refused us twice maybe. And then I had to pull in my big guns from New York to join me so we get a deal done and start working together.
That's right. Copco came to town.
Yep.
I put the contract in my attorney's hands and I said, tell me exactly why I don't need to do business with Oscar so I can blame it on you. And the funny part about that is the attorney came back and said, geez, you know what? This is probably the best contract of all of your individual major medical companies. I think you ought to do business with them. And so that's kind of how that all started down.
All right. Well, there's a good lesson in there. Everyone, make sure you have a good attorney and a good contract.
Yeah. So back then, you were just the Texas sales leader, and it's been a pleasure to watch you over the last 4 or 5 years kind of grow into the role and mature, and I'm very proud of you for that. And now you're the market director of the Central Region. So what's next for you? Are you going to be moving to New York?
No, definitely not. It's funny. I have a confession to make. I never actually worked in sales prior to coming to Oscar. Where my passion came from was I was a consultant, and I worked with a lot of the big health plans. You name it, I probably worked with them in some capacity, helping them figure out, the ACA and get ready for all the changes that were happening in health insurance. Along the way, I got an itch to go build a health insurance company and heard about this little one in New York called Oscar. And, for my wife and I, New York wasn't the right fit for where we were and what we wanted to be doing. And then the opportunity emerged to come do sales in Texas. Mm-hmm. So I said, why not?
Right.
And it's been a fantastic ride. Started by leading our distribution efforts here in the state of Texas, and building a small team and a small office. And now we've been able to expand that reach, and I kind of lead our distribution across a number of states and have worn different interim hats. At one point, I helped get things going in California before handing that off to some peers. And so it's been fantastic. And the company itself, when I joined, we had about 200 employees and insured about 40,000 lives, almost all in New York. Now, here we are 4.5 years later, over 400,000 covered lives across, I hope I get this right, 15 states, I think. Yeah, 15 states, nearly 25 to 30 metros, and we are well over 1,000 employees.
That's awesome, man. Well, here's kind of my take on Oscar Health. There's that old saying about less is more. You guys get more done with fewer people than any other company that we've ever worked with, and that's something I really appreciate about Oscar Health. The service levels have been outstanding. So just give me a kind of a high-level overview of who is Oscar.
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess it starts with the DNA of the company and how we were founded. So we are the young kid on the block when it comes to health insurance companies. And it all started with an idea in 2012, 2013, when our founder was having a baby in New York and could not figure out how to navigate the healthcare system. And he's a computer engineer by background. And he really thought there's got to be a better way for the insurance company to help guide me through this maze of a complex healthcare industry. And so that was the genesis of the company. And really it's founded on this idea that better service, both through self-service. So, we have apps and self-serve, technology that's going to be best in class, as well as customer service, right? So we take a different approach so that everybody has a dedicated concierge team. So anytime you call, text, or email us, you're going to deal with the same small service team. Mm-hmm. We realized by enabling that kind of stuff, we could basically provide a better level of service, and that's what we're all about.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then you took a look as a consultant out there in this big blue ocean of opportunity. Why did you pick health insurance, one of the most controversial things of all of Congress debating anything, and why Oscar?
There's an icebreaker I use sometimes when I'm meeting with agents, and I'll kind of kick it off and I'll say, look, there's only one thing everybody in this room has in common, and it's that we never thought we'd work in health insurance.
Amen.
So hey, I'm just as guilty on that one. Really, it came down to I like solving interesting, complex, challenging problems. And in the consulting world, that's what I did all day, every day, working with these big, giant Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies. And oftentimes I would see that they had a really interesting idea, but it became so hard for them to implement it because they were constrained by kind of legacy thinking, but also more acutely legacy technology systems and 20 different companies that had been combined over 10 or 15 years. And it just really made it hard to get things done. So that was what was appealing to about Oscar to me was I was going into an environment where we had a fresh, clean slate, not to mention our own technology that we're building ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you went back to that technology platform because I do think that's one of the reasons why you guys are so efficient. And y'all have an industry-leading mobile app. And one of the concerns I had really early on was, oh my gosh, these guys are trying to make everybody go online to do their healthcare shopping. And I figured, well, maybe there'll be some millennials that are attracted to that, but they're ignoring the 50 and 60-year-old crowd. That didn't turn out to be the case. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So here's what I like to tell people, and I talk to agents. We're not naive, right? People aren't choosing their health insurance plan based on the quality of the app. But when you think about the experience people have once they enroll, that's where you want to make sure you're at their fingertips whenever you need to be. And so, all of our plans come with free and unlimited telemedicine. And what we do is make it really easy. When you open up that app, you'd see a button and it's just right staring you in the face. It says, talk to a doctor for free right now. And what we've realized is by making it that easy, that intuitive, you can get grandma on board, not to mention mom and dad and the millennials and everybody. And so when we look at the adoption, let's say, of things like our mobile app, we're usually about 10x the industry average. So if the average health plan, and don't quote me on these stats, but if the average health plan has about 3% of people downloading their mobile app, ours is maybe 30 or 40%. And when we look at that engagement, of course, it does skew a little bit higher for our younger audience, but it's still quite high even when we look at that pre-Medicare population of 50 to 65.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of intuitive, you're kind of reading my mind as to where I was headed with this. Your app really pushes Teladoc as an option. And to me, I think that's a great tool by which to hold the premiums in check. And we all know that that's about retention and trying to keep those customers on the book so that they really fall in love with their health plan and get more from it. So can you kind of tell me what's the Oscar opinion of Teladoc and where are we headed with this concept?
Yeah, so Teladoc is a company within the telemedicine space, and we do partner with them to a certain extent. We also handle some of our telemedicine visits with our own in-house virtual PCP solution. So if you call us maybe on a night or a weekend or when things are a little bit backed up in the queue, it'll be an actual Teladoc visit that you have. Just, they're a great partner for us, as well as for a lot of our folks, they'll also talk directly with an Oscar physician. The reason we think it's valuable is quite simple. Is if, let's say, out of 10 televisits that we're able to support, 1 or 2 people avoid a single ER visit, not only is it going to save those clients considerable money on copays and co-insurance, but it's going to save us money too because we also foot a large part of that bill. So the math gets pretty easy when you start seeing how much money you can save for your consumers as well as for the health plan itself.
Yep.
And that can translate into lower premiums for everybody in the long run.
Yeah, I agree with that. So the whole market in general over the years 2014 through really 15, 16, 17, I think the one thing we can all agree was there were huge rate increases and the market was very unstable. And through some of my own lobbying efforts, part of my mantra was to preach stabilization in the marketplace, lower premiums, lower rate increases. Can you give me an idea of how Oscar is helping the market become more stable for the futures, the next couple of OEP, so to speak?
Sure. Where to start? There's such a history with the ACA, and I think we all lived through those first couple of years. And the truth is, back in 2014-15, none of the carriers going into the Affordable Care Act really knew how to price their individual products. Mm-hmm. And that was what we saw, right, was networks that were probably too broad without good unit costs negotiated with the hospitals and doctors. And so you had specific carriers that were being selected against in terms of they weren't able to get enough healthy risk and unhealthy risk. We all lived through it. We saw the major retreats, especially from the big nationals, often called the BUCAs, although many blues actually stayed in, including here in Texas. What we emerged on the other side of that, though, was an understanding of what it really took to win. And luckily at Oscar, by being small and more nimble, we were able to adjust more quickly to that reality. And that included building our own networks, going out there and negotiating with best-in-class hospital systems to get good rates. And so one of the trade-offs in the ACA today, including with Oscar, is, you're not necessarily going to have every hospital in your metro in our network. You're not going to have every doctor in our network, but we do make it a point to go out there and find what we think are, the best value healthcare providers out there in terms of really high quality at good costs. Mm-hmm. And I think, we're not alone in recognizing that that's the strategy it takes to win, but that also helps us control the premiums and has largely stabilized the market. And now what we've seen over the last probably 2, maybe 3 OEs is the carrier exits have ceased. Mm-hmm. People are expanding, including Oscar. Just 3 years ago, we were in maybe 6 states. Now we're in 15. We've grown from about 100,000 lives 3 years ago to over 400,000 lives covered. And again, I think we're part of a rising tide that lifts all boats here in the ACA market. So great time for people to take a fresh look at it because it is stabilized.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the word strategy. I love that word because you guys are always forward thinking, and that's what I've grown to appreciate about you guys in a short period of time. Just here in the last couple of days, it was announced that you all have a new strategy aligned up with Cigna. And I was pretty intrigued by that. Why would a big company like Cigna want to do business with just a company that's 400,000 members in 15 states? Tell me about that strategic alliance.
I'll tell you what I know and what I can tell you. And I can't really, speak for Cigna, but I would say this is probably part of a larger trend we're seeing in the industry where you have collaboration, joint ventures, partnerships. And obviously Cigna saw something very special in Oscar, and we saw something very special in them. Mm-hmm. When we think about Cigna and where they've kind of made their core business over the years, it's in that large or medium-sized employer segment. At Oscar, we've really focused on the ACA consumer, the individual purchaser. So we recently announced a joint venture to team up and focus on the small business segment. This is a market that covers about 15 million people nationally through fully insured small group health products that are ACA compliant. And that's what we're going to partner up and do. Bringing together the power of Cigna's networks and, their insurance entities with the Oscar experience. Mm-hmm. And we think those two things combined, we're going to have a really special offering out there for small business owners. Mm-hmm. Here later in the spring, we'll announce some of our initial markets. We'll have to do it as a staged kind of geographic rollout. So we'll probably have our first 3 or 4 metro areas announced here later in the year with the idea of, building beyond that in the years to come.
So just a few weeks ago, speaking of strategies and small businesses, I had the CEO of Take Command Health on, and I got some really great feedback on this new individual coverage HRA kind of movement. And what I discovered through that was that about 71% of the employers out there in that less than 50 size group market don't offer group health insurance. How are you guys using strategies like that to try and build sales?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. Number one, we're extremely excited about ICHRA, which I think it's still a little rough on our tongue, but we're getting used to it, right? I was just in Washington, D.C. for a conference on this topic a few years ago. The CEO of Take Command Health was there as well as a number of other players in the space, both from a government side, employer side, and broker side, and carrier side. And we had some great discussions. The way I think about this is there's 2 great options with a solution like ICHRA. One is an on-ramp to offering benefits. Mm-hmm. And so, great point, right? The majority of small businesses out there aren't currently offering a benefits program.
Too expensive.
Right. So what if you could dip your toes into that water by saying, hey, look, we at least want to set aside some pre-tax dollars to help reimburse your individual market premiums. We'd love to see that happen more, and we think it's a great on-ramp. Mm-hmm. Similarly, on the backside, I think ICHRA also represents an off-ramp from a traditional group plan, mm-hmm. where, you as maybe a mid-sized employer or even a small employer are tired of kind of the hassle involved with picking a plan each year and figuring out, how I'm going to adjust my deductible with the help of my agent, of course, to make sure I can keep premiums relatively in line. Instead, you can kind of set a budget and let your employees shop. So we're very excited about it. As a carrier, we want to make sure that we are partnered with the folks out there that are on the leading edge of this and staying smart on, I think, some of the operational things that could become hiccups if we're not aware of it. That includes making sure we're, recognizing qualifying life events that might be tied to enrollment outside of open enrollment. That's because someone's now got a qualifying ICHRA offer. So it's little things like that by making sure we're one of the easiest carriers to do business with on this new front.
This kind of dances into an area of where we can discuss legislation. And one of the things I appreciate you is you're that type of person who isn't going to just sit back and accept the way that things are. Status quo is not good enough for Kyle. And because of that, you've been real proactive with your involvement with a couple of professional associations, two of which were Texas Association of Health Plans, and then on a larger scale, the National Association of Health Underwriters. What have you been able to glean from those experiences?
Yeah, so NAHU, first I'll start with NAHU. As a carrier rep, I'll say that in air quotes, I recognize right away the importance of getting involved with that group. I've yet to see a similar group that better represents the interests of both agents and carriers at the state level, at the local level, and at the national level. And it's been an absolute pleasure getting more involved with NAHU over the years and finding opportunities to sponsor events. And even when we enter a new market per se, like I'll still remember when we launched our joint venture with the Cleveland Clinic in Northeast Ohio a few years ago, first thing I did was call up the local chapter president in Northeast Ohio and got a warm welcome reception. And that was my path into helping us establish distribution partnerships there. So I'll say not only has it been great on the regulatory and legislative front, but also on our ability to conduct business and use it for that purpose. In Texas, we have a trade association that's called the Texas Association of Health Plans. And as is often the case in a kind of startup environment, I was asked to step in and help, manage our relationship with that group. And they are world-class in terms of the leadership team there and what they do to represent the industry's interest here in the state of Texas, both to the legislature, the governor's office, and the DOI.
Well, Oscar has been one of those companies that has grown exponentially over the last couple of years. Part of that's because of your involvement and your team's involvement. And that kind of leads me to the next question about really now what motivates you. And this isn't that what keeps you up at night kind of question because there's a lot of opportunity. But if you had to kind of sketch out the next couple of years and you were sitting in front of a new broker, tell me, if I'm that new broker, why should I work with Oscar, and why should I even mess with health insurance? What excites you about the future?
Oh, man. Well, we've already hit on a few of them. So I would say a couple of things. One, the individual market is growing. Here in Texas, we saw the on-exchange reports that recently came out from the FFM or from CMS, whatever you want to call it. And in Texas, we turned the corner and we actually grew the individual market on the exchange by about 3 or 4% this year. So it's a growing market with a growing opportunity, similar to Medicare Advantage. Second, the commissions. If I'm an agent, there was real concern that was valid a few years ago when we saw certain carriers stop paying commissions. Actually, the commissions have been increasing the last year or two. And, I can speak for Oscar. We pay both during the open enrollment period and outside the open enrollment period. So there's real money to be made, and it's a stabilizing industry. So I think if I'm an agent or just in general, I'm looking at an opportunity, there were a lot of folks that walked away from the ACA a few years ago. Agents, they come in all shapes and sizes, and there was a good chunk of them that said, you know what, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't understand this ACA. I'm going to walk away from it. What that means is there's opportunity out there to help consumers. And I'll just give you a quick statistic on that. When we look at the state of Florida, for example, we see that upwards of 2/3, if not maybe close to 80% of consumers on the exchange are helped by licensed agents. When we look at Texas, the number's about half that. So there's a lot of consumers out there, and if I'll just focus on Texas, that need that guidance and support. And there's a lot of carriers out here who want to be extremely agent friendly, including us.
Yeah, and I would tend, and I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me right now, but I will tell you and our audience here, I think Oscar's been one of the easiest companies to do business with since we've started the ACA. And it's just a darn shame that y'all weren't here in 2014.
Yeah, and just, if you're not sure how to get started with us, what I do is I direct you to our website, hioscar.com. Click on the broker portal, and it literally takes you about 5 minutes to submit your appointment stuff. And then we'll get it approved in a day or two. And from there, we got tons of training and resources, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, and that's been part of the experience we've had, is that the onboarding process for new brokers is very easy. And then, of course, they get the world-class website, all of the other assets of Teledoc and everything else we talked about today. So I just want to say thank you again for coming over here today and sitting down with us to share a couple of thoughts about Oscar. Any last thoughts or parting shots?
No, I'll just return the gratitude and say thank you. I think, the brokerage as a partner has been absolutely key to our continued growth and success in the state of Texas and soon beyond. And I think that, if I am a new agent out there and I am trying to figure out things like the ACA, I'll just plug that, here at the brokerage, they do great agent training. And if you're starting from zero and you're not someone who's going to sit there and watch 3 hours of webinars by yourself, and I'll raise my hand and say I'm not that type of person, take a look at what the team here at the brokerage have to offer in terms of training opportunities, because they'll get you up to speed real quick.
So we can add the Mutual Admiration Society to our associations. Is that the deal? Huh?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Hey, Kyle, thanks a lot, and appreciate you being here. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.